The large, beautiful, and alluring mandala flower swayed its petals, slowly blooming at this moment. Its purple light shimmered quietly, causing the entire surrounding space to twist unnaturally. The purple glow enveloped the ancient sky dragon eagle's massive form like a screen. In the eyes of the sky dragon eagle, filled with a fierce and bloodthirsty glare, there was a sudden surge of panic. The mysterious mandala flower made it feel a death-like threat. That threat was far stronger than when the nine nether had appeared earlier. Boom! The eagle flapped its massive wings, its enormous body crashing into the purple light screen. The terrifying shockwave caused ripples to spread through the purple light. Chen looked indifferently at the ancient sky dragon eagle in a frenzy, his hand forming the lotus-like seal, which began to shift again. Sizzle! Within the enchanting mandala, purple vines suddenly shot out. These vines seemed to be formed from endless runes, appearing mysterious, with sharp thorns covering their surface. Whoosh! Whoosh! The purple vines spread like a flood, wrapping around the sky dragon eagle's massive body with lightning speed. Screech! As the vines coiled around it, the ancient sky dragon eagle let out a piercing shriek. The terrifying fluctuations that had been surging from its huge body began to dissipate at an incredible speed, as though it had been completely restrained. The nine nether, watching from the side, slightly curled her red lips. She knew just how powerful the mysterious mandala flower was. Back when she was hiding inside Chen's body, she had suffered a great loss from it. Now, Chen's strength was vastly greater, and with her own power, he was able to truly summon the mandala flower. The sky dragon eagle had certainly met its match this time. Boom! Boom! Violent spiritual energy surged wildly, and the ancient sky dragon eagle, sensing the danger, struggled desperately. But no matter how it fought, it could not escape the purple vines. Furthermore, the thorns on the vines grew deeper into its body with each struggle, causing blood to spill out. Seal! Chen's expression grew serious as his seal rapidly shifted. He shouted in a low voice. Sizzle! Countless vines began to retract, and the sky dragon eagle's immense body was slowly pulled toward the blooming mandala flower. Though the movement was slow, it was incredibly firm, unaffected by the eagle's struggle. As the mysterious mandala flower grew nearer, fear finally filled the sky dragon eagle's eyes. It hastily called out, I surrender. I will no longer interfere in the matter between you and Ji Xuan. Chen's gaze remained calm. He looked at the sky dragon eagle and slowly shook his head. It was a little too late to submit now, and he wasn't the type to show unnecessary mercy at a critical moment. Thus, the purple vine's speed increased. Finally, the enormous body of the sky dragon eagle was pulled entirely into the purple mandala flower, and its petals began to close, turning into a bud that completely enveloped the sky dragon eagle. Mysterious purple light patterns flickered on the surface of the bud, like a magical seal, trapping all the fluctuations of the sky dragon eagle within it. Boom! Boom! The bud occasionally trembled violently, likely due to the sky dragon eagle's resistance. However, it was unable to break free. Across the land, countless people stared at the huge and alluring flower bud in the sky, their faces blank. Who would have thought that the once majestic and invincible sky dragon eagle would be subdued like this? This was a spirit beast of the 4th grade supreme level. Even some of the academy heads present wouldn't have been confident in completely suppressing it. Yet now, it had been done by such a young boy. This scene, even for the academy heads in the sky with their composure, caused them to fall silent. They exchanged glances, feeling shaken in their hearts. Then, their gazes turned complex as they looked at the tall and slender boy. This youth is extraordinary. Amidst the many gazes, Chen raised his hand. With Chen's strength, even though he had temporarily sealed the ancient sky dragon eagle with the power of 9 nether, he couldn't truly refine it. Therefore, this step still required 9 nether's help. Given 9 nether's current power, coupled with the might of the undying flame, it shouldn't be difficult to deal with the ancient sky dragon eagle. As 9 nether devoured the bud, Ji Xuan, who had been with his eyes tightly shut, suddenly opened them. His face turned as pale as death, and a mouthful of blood sprayed out. His expression was drained, and his eyes were filled with horror. Although his body had been controlled by the ancient sky dragon eagle earlier, he had still been able to see everything that was happening. Ji Xuan looked in disbelief at the indifferent Chen in the sky. He had actually defeated the ancient sky dragon eagle? Because of the symbiotic bond, Ji Xuan could sense that he had lost all connection with the ancient sky dragon eagle. Clearly, the latter had been thoroughly trapped. How could this be? Ji Xuan murmured in a daze, his face as white as a sheet. The once vibrant spark in his eyes had completely vanished, replaced by deep gloom. He couldn't believe it. He had actually lost. Over the years, he had soared above his peers, leaving those so-called geniuses far behind. Even Chen, whom he had once seen as a great rival, had never been given much thought. After all, he knew the strength of his trump cards, which were enough to crush any of his peers. Yet, the final outcome struck him like a thunderbolt. He had used his trump cards over and over again, but this boy kept suppressing them, turning the tide of battle in his favor. Unknowingly, the boy he had once expelled from the spirit road had now surpassed him once again. He looked up at the young man, standing atop the colossal body of the 9 Nether Soul Sparrow. At this moment, the latter was radiating a dazzling light, clearly becoming the brightest presence in this world. This caused a surge of jealousy and resentment in Ji Xuan's heart. All those honors and glories should have been his. He was unwilling. Just as Ji Xuan gritted his teeth, he suddenly felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He saw the cold, killing intent flash in Chen's indifferent eyes. Swish! In the blink of an eye, Chen's figure vanished. Ji Xuan's scalp tingled. His heart surged with fear as he realized what Chen intended. He was going to cut the root. I admit. Ji Xuan gritted his teeth, his face turning ashen. He was about to shout in surrender. If he didn't, with Chen's temperament, the latter would certainly kill him. Though admitting defeat dealt a heavy blow to his pride, Ji Xuan was not a fool. Losing face was better than losing his life. His face could be recovered, but once his life was gone, everything was over. He was confident in himself. As long as he was alive, one day, he would make Chen regret it. However, Chen clearly understood his opponent better than Ji Xuan understood himself, so he would not give him that chance. Before Ji Xuan could even finish his words, Chen's ghostly figure appeared before him. Without hesitation, Chen's 2 fingers curved like a sword, unleashing an overwhelming burst of spiritual power. The finger wind shot out like a streak of lightning, piercing straight into Ji Xuan's chest. Swoosh! The finger wind pierced through Ji Xuan's chest, blood splattering everywhere. His body flew backward, but Chen remained expressionless. Without a moment's delay, he stepped forward, delivering another palm strike that carried a heavy killing intent. Audacious! In the high sky, the dean of Sacred Spirit Academy, Tiansheng, bellowed furiously. He leaped up, causing the world to darken. An indescribable pressure descended, pinning Chen in place, rendering him immobile. Humph! However, just as this pressure engulfed him, another cold snort shattered it. The Grand Song Academy headmaster stood up, his cold gaze fixed on Tiansheng. Chen remained expressionless, not at all disturbed by the actions of these 2 powerful figures. Seizing the opportunity, he shot forward, delivering a mighty palm strike to Ji Xuan's body. The palm crackled with thunderous light, and its force was brutally overwhelming. Thunder surged through the air, and Ji Xuan's chest caved in. A mouthful of blood spurted out, mixed with shattered internal organs. His body was violently knocked backward, but his eyes still burned with intense hatred. Whoosh! However, this hatred only lasted for an instant before being replaced by fear. He saw the 9 Nether Soul Sparrow in the sky suddenly open its mouth, and a purple-gold fireline swept toward him, engulfing him entirely. The terrifying heat raged, and Ji Xuan's body turned to ash in an instant, under the horrified gazes of countless onlookers. Sizzle! As the ashes scattered, a faint point of light shot out. It was Ji Xuan's Supreme C. Even though his physical body was destroyed, his divine soul hid within the Supreme C. As long as his divine soul existed, his body could eventually be remade. Whoosh! However, just as the light point surged out, another purple flame descended from the heavens, directly incinerating the light point, causing an explosive burst. Immediately, a wild torrent of spiritual power raged uncontrollably. A shrill, despairing scream echoed through the heavens and earth. Scum! High in the sky, Dean Tiansheng of the Sacred Spirit Academy roared in fury. With a wave of his hand, a torrent of spiritual power instantly formed, howling through the air, crashing into the rampaging spiritual energy, and finally grasping a dimmed light point, which was Ji Xuan's divine soul. The torrent protected the light point as it retreated quickly, eventually landing in Dean Tiansheng's hand. He looked at the almost ethereal shadow in his palm. This was Ji Xuan's divine soul, but it had been severely damaged, on the verge of dissipating. This caused Dean Tiansheng's face to turn ashen. Ji Xuan's divine soul had been heavily wounded. This was an injury that could not be healed. From now on, even if Ji Xuan could still cultivate, he would likely never achieve any great accomplishments. You truly have some audacity. Dean Tiansheng's face darkened like a storm cloud as he glared at Mu Chun and the 9 Nether Soul Sparrow. The coldness in his eyes caused the temperature in the surroundings to suddenly drop. You truly have some audacity. Dean Tiansheng's angry roar reverberated across the skies. With those words, it felt as if the heavens and earth were about to collapse. The spiritual energy of the world boiled and howled, as if his words alone had triggered a law, carrying an immense oppressive force. Dean Tiansheng, as the head of the Sacred Spirit Academy, was no less formidable than the ancient sky dragon eagle from earlier, and the sheer power revealed by his roar was far stronger. Caught in this overwhelming pressure, Mu Chun felt as though he was a small boat tossed on a raging sea, on the verge of capsizing. His face was grim with intensity. Whoosh! In the sky, the 9 Nether Soul Sparrow quickly shrank, and a graceful figure descended, standing before Mu Chun to block the oppressive force. The 9 Nether Sparrow's delicate face was cold as she gazed at Dean Tiansheng. Despite sensing his profound strength, there was no hint of fear in her beautiful eyes. Humph! Dean Tiansheng, with your status, how dare you act against a student? Aren't you showing utter disregard for our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy? Dean Taitsong of the Grand Song Academy also roared in anger. He stepped forward, directly opposing Dean Tiansheng, standing tall in the air, absorbing all the pressure that came from him. All the students present were silent in fear. Even the heads of other spiritual academies dared not intervene hastily. After all, both Dean Tiansheng and Dean Taitsong possessed some of the most powerful strength in the area. Humph, what an absurd accusation. Dean Taitsong, you're too protective. This child is ruthless and vicious. Ji Xuan has already been defeated, and yet he still dares to go for the kill. Dean Tiansheng's face turned ashen as he coldly said, "This kind of battle is dangerous by nature." Ji Xuan struck first, but I didn't see any mercy from him either, Dean Taitsong sneered. And according to the rules, as long as no one concedes, the battle continues until the end. But just now, Dean Tiansheng, you rashly intervened, breaking the rules. Now that so many academy heads are here, you'll have to answer for your actions. Dean Tiansheng paused slightly, then spoke in a low voice. Earlier, Ji Xuan showed signs of conceding, but Mu Chun was relentless, leaving him no chance. Dean Tiansheng, this is not some children's game. This is the championship battle, Dean Taitsong said with a mocking smile. Dean Tiansheng's face darkened completely. The space behind him twisted violently, as if his dark expression was warping reality itself. It seemed that Dean Taitsong's sharp words had left him with no way out. Groundless excuses. I think Mu Chun should be disqualified from the championship. Impossible. The headmaster of Taitsong refused to yield, his face cold as ice. Behind him, the space also began to distort violently, and faintly, a colossal shadow, as if a giant being of thousands of feet, slowly began to materialize around his body. This giant shadow was entirely azure blue, radiating an aura of chaos. As it inhaled and exhaled, clouds and winds took shape, and an indescribable pressure spread out, causing even the space itself to tremble. Is Headmaster Taitsong planning to spar with me? Headmaster Tiansheng of the Sacred Spirit Academy sneered. A dazzling light of holy radiance began to slowly emerge around him, the endless brilliance filling every corner of the space. These two titans had summoned their supreme Dharmakayas. If they were to fight here, even this small space might not be able to withstand the clash. Countless students watched in awe, struggling to even breathe under the immense pressure of the supreme Dharmakayas. Chen also stared at the two towering figures in the air, his expression grave. This was the true supreme Dharmakaya. Once activated, a single movement could shatter the heavens and earth. The power was something to be admired. Two of you, in front of so many students, disregarding decorum, don't you think you are tarnishing the reputation of the 5 great academies? As Taizong and Tiansheng confronted each other, the heads of the 10,000 Phoenixes Spiritual Academy, Martial Spiritual Academy, and Azure Sky Spirit Academy finally furrowed their brows and spoke. In the sky, the two supreme Dharmakayas, exuding immense pressure, gradually faded and disappeared. It seemed both men understood that if they clashed here, it would truly be an embarrassment. Headmaster Taizong, you've gotten a bit too ahead of yourself. There are still more people on this stage than just your Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, Headmaster Tiansheng said, his expression gradually softening. Below, Luo Li and Wen Qingxian appeared beside Chen. Hearing this, Wen Qingxian smiled charmingly and said, Headmaster Tiansheng, do you think I still have the strength to compete with Chen for the championship? And as for Chen winning, I am very supportive. Wen Qingxian, being sharp and intelligent, could easily tell that Tiansheng was trying to stir up thoughts in the mind of Tang Qiu, the headmaster of the 10,000 Phoenixes Spiritual Academy. With a single sentence, she shut down all possibilities. Tang Qiu, still carrying an air of grace, glanced at Wen Qingxian, as if he had seen through her thoughts. He could only helplessly say, Our 10,000 Phoenixes Spiritual Academy is not in a position to claim the championship. I think we should stick to the rules, right? Headmaster Tiansheng's lips twitched, and he could only swallow his frustration. With a flick of his sleeve, he sat back down. It seemed he understood that today, it would be hard to revoke Chen's qualification for the championship. I withdraw, Wen Qingxian said with a smile, raising her delicate hand. Luo Li also smiled slightly and extended her hand. At this point, only Chen remained, and the championship was clearly his. In the sky, all the headmasters of the 5 great academies, except for Headmaster Tiansheng, nodded lightly. Looking around, the other heads of the spiritual academies also nodded, signaling their approval of the final result. Since everyone has voted, we, the 5 great academies, hereby announce that the champion of this year's Spiritual Academy Grand Competition is Chen of Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. As Tang Qiu's graceful voice echoed, there was a brief moment of silence, and then a deafening cheer rang out, as if thunder had struck the skies. The entire space seemed to shake in response. Except for the students of the Sacred Spirit Academy, who looked dejected, students from other spiritual academies applauded and cheered enthusiastically, their gazes filled with awe as they stared at the slender figure on the battle stage. Though this young man was not from their academy, the incredible strength he had demonstrated made them genuinely admire him. Not only was he the most dazzling figure of this year's competition, but perhaps, in the past century of Spiritual Academy Grand Competitions, no one had been able to surpass him. Brother, you're invincible. Amidst the cheers, the most excited were the students of Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Their faces flushed with excitement. They cheered in unison, shaking the heavens and the earth. At the 10,000 Phoenix Spiritual Academy, Tang Xun'er gazed at the dazzling figure amidst the cheers that filled the air. Her eyes momentarily lost focus. Compared to 3 years ago, he was becoming more and more captivating. He was gradually unleashing his astonishing potential. She was genuinely happy to see him shine more brightly, but when her lively eyes looked at the 3 other outstanding figures standing beside him, they dimmed slightly. She lightly bit her red lips. The boy before her seemed no longer the shy little one who had always tightly held her hand and called her Xun'er sister, the one who liked to follow her around. He was becoming more radiant, and perhaps, one day, he would be known throughout the great 1,000 worlds. She didn't find this laughable or arrogant at all, because she believed in him. Chen, keep going. You're becoming more amazing every day. If Uncle Mu knew, he would be so proud. You will be the pride of our northern spirit realm. Tang Xun'er clenched her small fist and a gentle, affectionate smile appeared on her beautiful face. Chen stood on the battle stage, listening to the roaring cheers. His previously tense nerves finally relaxed, and as they did, his body swayed slightly. Beside him, 3 delicate hands reached out to support him, but they paused when they saw each other. Chen didn't fall, but his face was pale. It was clear that the previous battle had drained him significantly. Ji glanced at Luo Li and Wen Qingxian, but did not speak. With a slight movement, her body transformed into a streak of light and entered Chen's body. "Congratulations, champion," Wen Qingxian said with a smile. Chen let out a bitter laugh, but was too exhausted to respond to her teasing. Luo Li, seeing his state, felt a pang of sympathy. After a brief hesitation, she courageously reached out and gently took his hand. The smooth, jade-like touch revived Chen slightly, and he instinctively squeezed her hand tightly, unwilling to let go. Oh! From the direction of the Northern Song Spiritual Academy, countless students howled in envy at the sight, their gazes filled with longing. Luo Li's face turned slightly red, her delicate cheeks blushing so beautifully that even the world seemed brighter for a moment. "You did it. Congratulations," she said, gathering her courage to speak as she looked at Chen. Perhaps from the moment he left the spirit road, he had been striving with all his might for this day. Others only saw his soaring figure, but they overlooked the efforts that made even her heart ache. Chen gazed into her crystal-clear eyes, tightening his grip on her small hand. He raised his head, the sunlight casting a glow on his handsome face. "Luo Li, yes. Believe me, one day, I will become an unparalleled powerhouse. For you, I will move mountains and seas." A soft, tender smile appeared on the girl's exquisite face. She nodded lightly, her hand tightening around his. "I will wait for you." When the final champion appeared, the tense atmosphere that had hung over the world began to relax. The previous battles had been so thrilling and unpredictable that when they ended, many breathed a sigh of relief. This battle had been intense, and had it lasted longer, many might have struggled to endure. With the conclusion of the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition, the protective barrier over the battle stage and the various academy areas dissipated, easing the restrictions on the students. High above, the giant mirror of judgment slowly rotated, its light shimmering. One by one, figures were shot out of the mirror, landing in disarray. These were the individuals who had been trapped inside. Shen Songxing, Li Xiantong, and Su Xian fell beside Chen, immediately giving him a thumbs up. Despite being trapped in the mirror of judgment, they had still witnessed the earth-shattering battle. Chen smiled at them, then turned to Wen Qingxian, who was lazily stretching, her perfect figure becoming even more alluring in the process. Wen Qingxian nodded. "Once the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition ends, this space will close, and all the participants will return to their respective academies. If you want to gather again, it might only happen during some inter-academy exchanges. What's the matter? Can't bear to part with me?" Wen Qingxian glanced at Chen with a playful smile in her phoenix eyes. "Well, you could apply to join our 10,000 Phoenixes Spiritual Academy. Although we only accept female students, since you're the champion of the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition, I'm sure our headmaster would be happy to make an exception for you." Chen could only give an awkward smile in response to Wen Qingxuan's teasing. "Don't worry, we'll probably meet again. But by then, I think you might not be the same person anymore." Wen Qingxian gently tucked a strand of hair that had fallen over her forehead, her smile sweet as she spoke. Chen nodded slightly. By then, he would likely have left the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy to pursue a stronger path. Wen Qingxian likely had a powerful background as well. When they met again, it might not be under the same circumstances. "Chen, if we meet again next time, I don't want to see you covered in dust and looking all defeated. After all, you're the champion of the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition. While the 5 great academies are small compared to the great 1,000 worlds, if you've lost your edge and confidence by then, I think I'll be really disappointed, and I'll be disappointed for Luo Li too." Wen Qingxuan's gaze lingered on Chen. Her voice was playful, but there was no hint of jest in her tone. Chen fell into a brief silence. He knew that the road ahead would not be easy. It would be even more difficult than what he had faced at the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Here, He could cultivate in peace. But once he stepped into the vast and endless great thousand worlds, the burden would only grow heavier. Although the supreme stage was within reach, that was merely the starting point of the true path of strength. However, on the path of strength, talent was secondary. The most important thing was a heart that remained unshaken by external factors. Over the years, Chen had experienced much, and if his heart had wavered, he wouldn't have come this far. Chen looked up at Ji Xuan's stunning beauty and said softly, "Let's wait and see." Ji Xuan's face lit up with a smile. She nodded and said, "If you don't disappoint me by then, I might consider falling for someone else." As she spoke, her teasing gaze flicked between Luo Li and Chen. Luo Li could only look at her helplessly. "Chen, congratulations." As they spoke, Wu Ling from the Martial Spiritual Academy, Wu Yingying, and Wen Busheng also gathered around to congratulate him. Chen was also very fond of them, smiling widely. They all knew that after they parted ways here, it was uncertain when they would meet again, because the Spiritual Academy was only a stepping stone on their cultivation journey. In the future, they would step into the magnificent and alluring Great Thousand Worlds. By then, their state of mind would probably have changed. It wouldn't be easy to retain the same purity they had now. So Chen truly cherished these friends, made through trials, whom he had met in the most unexpected of circumstances. Wu Ling, Wen Busheng, and the others looked at Chen with complex expressions. Who would have thought back then that the eventual champion of the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition would not be the renowned Ji Xuan or the famous Wen Xian, but this boy who had remained inconspicuous at the start? When Chen was caught in the mirror of judgment by Ji Xuan and Shui Tian'e, they had some regrets. But who could have predicted that this fierce young man would rise again, turning the tide of battle and finally defeating Ji Xuan? Moreover, the ruthless methods Chen used to defeat Ji Xuan sent a chill down their spines. This young man, though usually gentle, when driven by a killing intent, was truly the god of slaughter, striking without hesitation. Wu Ling, Wen Busheng, and the others were all proud individuals. Even Ji Xuan hadn't been able to earn their full respect. But this time, facing Chen, who was of similar age, they couldn't help but admire him. It seemed that in the future, this young man wouldn't remain ordinary. Perhaps many years later, he would make a name for himself in the Great Thousand Worlds. "Hey, you still owe me a favor, remember?" Wu Yingying glared at Chen, hands on her hips, still looking like a little firecracker. Yet, the blush on her fair cheeks was hard to hide. "What does Miss Wu want me to do to repay you?" Chen smiled. Wu Yingying glared at him for a while before awkwardly mumbling, "I haven't decided yet. I'll tell you when I figure it out." Chen chuckled. This little firecracker was obviously still very cute. The words of a man can't be trusted, especially not someone like you, a pervert. Wu Yingying snorted lightly. Chen coughed awkwardly. "But you were pretty cool, just now, better than my brother. Guess I didn't cheer for you in vain." Wu Yingying's face flushed slightly, her bright eyes fixed on Chen. There was no hint of girlish shyness. She spoke plainly and directly. Thanks." Chen scratched his head, offering a warm and sunny smile, much softer than the cold demeanor he had when clashing with Ji Xuan earlier. When Xuan, standing nearby, couldn't help but roll her eyes. She leaned toward Luo Li and whispered, "This guy's popularity with women is ridiculous. I can't imagine how many girls he'll attract once you're gone. Are you sure you're okay with that? Maybe you should just kick him to the curb and stick with me instead." Upon hearing Wen Xuan's words, deliberately lowered but still loud enough for him to hear, Chen's eyelids twitched involuntarily. Luo Li shot her a look of annoyance. Wen Xuan grinned at Chen, and as Luo Li and Shun Songxing spoke, she leaned in closer to him. Glancing toward the direction of the 10,000 Phoenixes Spiritual Academy, she said, "But you know, you have an old acquaintance over at our academy. Aren't you going to go say hi?" "Xun'er." Chen froze for a moment at the mention, and then his eyes lit up with joy. He turned his gaze toward the area of the 10,000 Phoenixes Spiritual Academy and soon spotted her. Standing there in a pale green dress, a young girl stood tall and graceful, her lively eyes locked on him. After 2 or 3 years, the youthful innocence of the girl had gradually faded, and she had blossomed into an even more radiant beauty. Even standing quietly in the midst of blooming flowers, she was still captivating. When she saw Mu Chen looking at her, Tang Xun'er's fair and delicate face broke into a gentle smile. Mu Chen's figure shifted, and he quickly moved through the crowd of charming young women in the 10,000 Phoenixes Spiritual Academy, making his way directly to Tang Xun'er. "Xun'er, it's been a long time." The girl still wore her hair in a ponytail, which lightly cascaded down to her slender waist. She smiled at Mu Chen, hands clasped behind her back, her body slightly tilted toward him, a mischievous grin playing on her delicate face. "Looks like you're doing pretty well for yourself now. Xun'er, you're even more beautiful now. It's a shame you're at the 10,000 Phoenixes Spiritual Academy. If you were at our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, I'm sure there'd be a crowd of suitors even more desperate than those chasing after senior sister Su Xian." Mu Chen sized up Tang Xun'er. Her figure was becoming increasingly alluring, and the subtle forward tilt of her body accentuated her curves. Tang Xun'er's beauty and charm, if placed at Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, would surely attract more admirers than even Su Xian. "You dare tease me?" Tang Xun'er's face flushed slightly, and she playfully raised a small fist toward Mu Chen. Mu Chen smiled. "How's life at the 10,000 Phoenixes Spiritual Academy?" "It's not great, because she's always thinking about a heartless man." A girlish voice laughed from the side. It seemed to be from a few of Tang Xun'er's friends, who had been curiously watching the dazzling young man from the various spiritual academies. Tang Xun'er's face immediately turned bright red, and she shot a sharp glare at those girls. They quickly giggled and scattered. Mu Chen gave a dry laugh, feeling a bit speechless as he gazed into Tang Xun'er's sparkling eyes. "Congratulations," Tang Xun'er said, not dwelling on the ambiguous topic. She smiled gently and continued, "I think if Uncle Mu knew, he'd be both happy and proud." Mu Chen also smiled warmly, missing his father. "Is she the girl you've always liked?" Tang Xun'er's beautiful eyes suddenly shifted to Luo Li, who stood in the distance, and she spoke softly. Mu Chen looked at Tang Xun'er and nodded gently. "She's outstanding and beautiful." Tang Xun'er blinked her long eyelashes and smiled with an expression that was both tender and affectionate. "Thanks." Mu Chen smiled back. Tang Xun'er lowered her head, her delicate toes gently brushing the ground. After a moment, she suddenly lifted her head and said, "Actually, I kind of regret coming to the 10,000 Phoenixes Spiritual Academy." Mu Chen scratched his head, unsure how to respond. After all, he and Tang Xun'er had grown up together. Their relationship was especially close, but he had never thought of it in a romantic sense. Mu Chen. At this moment, Tang Xun'er's lively eyes appeared even brighter, as if she had come to a realization. Her smile became even more captivating. The girl clenched her small fists, and in the depths of her eyes, there was the most profound determination. She had regretted once before, but she didn't want to keep regretting. Therefore, she needed to strive harder to catch up. At least then, she could stand by his side, just like her. Mu Chen gazed into the girl's eyes and finally gave a slight nod. Allowing her to have one more goal to pursue couldn't be a bad thing. "Then I'll wait for Xun'er to surpass me," she said. Mu Chen smiled warmly, and then looked up, gazing at the vast space filled with countless figures. He couldn't help but take a deep breath, his expression filled with nostalgia and ease. The Spiritual Academy Grand Competition had finally come to an end. After 3 years of cultivation at Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, he had handed in a perfect answer sheet. Although he knew that his true journey had only just begun, Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Even after nearly 10 days had passed since the conclusion of the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition, the heat it generated had yet to fade, and there were no signs of it diminishing. The entire academy was still immersed in an atmosphere of excitement and joy. As for the students' cheers and celebrations, the academy made no effort to stop them. Instead, they allowed it to continue. It seemed that even the higher-ups of the academy were just as happy. After all, such achievements were rare in the academy, probably only surpassing the peak period when the academy was first founded. After years of suppression, they had finally had a moment to raise their heads proudly. Luo God Society headquarters. A towering mountain, lush and green, stood high. From its peak, one could overlook the entire Luo God Society. The vast training grounds were filled with people, all in the midst of a celebration. At the summit of the mountain, a young boy lay quietly in the grass. The gentle breeze brushed against him, and the soft grass lazily rubbed against his face, giving him a warm and leisurely sensation. It made him involuntarily close his eyes. This peace was something he deeply enjoyed. During the intense and pressing months of the Spiritual Academy Grand Competition, such tranquility had been an almost impossible luxury. Only after experiencing the suffocating tension of that fierce competition could one truly understand the preciousness of this moment. The breeze also carried with it a faint, pleasant fragrance. A girl in a light green dress, looking elegant, quietly approached the boy. She gazed at his handsome face, and a soft smile appeared at the corners of her lips. With her slender, jade-like finger, she plucked a blade of grass and gently brushed it across Mu Chen's face. The ticklish feeling made Mu Chen lazily open his eyes. He looked at the girl, as beautiful as jade, and smiled broadly, reaching out his arm to pull her towards him. Luo Li, seeing this, nimbly stepped back. Her stunning face broke into a playful smile as she looked at Mu Chen and said, "The whole academy is celebrating, yet you, the main character, are so relaxed." "I really don't have the energy," Mu Chen replied, propping himself up with one hand and leaning against a large rock, showing a somewhat helpless smile. Seeing his smile, Luo Li, who had originally intended to tease him, couldn't help but feel a pang of tenderness. She squatted down beside him. In her clear, glass-like eyes, warmth flowed. "You've already done your best, do you know that? When you won the championship, I was proud of you too," Luo Li said softly. In her gaze was a gentle affection, a tenderness that could melt the heart of even the coldest man. Hearing her sweet and gentle voice, Mu Chen's helpless smile slowly faded, replaced by an indescribable emotion, one of profound contentment. The thousands of praises from others were nothing compared to the soft, affectionate gaze of the girl before him. "Luo Li." The girl responded with a smile. "Give me a hug," Mu Chen said, grinning as he stretched out his arms. Luo Li's face turned slightly red, and she shook her head. "No, I want one." Mu Chen immediately sprang up, swiftly wrapping his arms around her soft, slender waist. He forcefully pushed her down into the grass, pinning her underneath him. Looking at the familiar face just inches away, breathing in her scent, Luo Li's face turned crimson. She raised her small fist, blushing and playfully hitting him. "Pervert." Mu Chen didn't make any further moves. Instead, he quietly gazed at her exquisite and beautiful face. Unconsciously, the girl who once stood before him as a child was now growing more beautiful by the day. Her aura was becoming astonishingly elegant, which made Mu Chen momentarily dazed. Perhaps one day, sooner or later, she would shed her youthful innocence and become the true queen of the Luo god clan, revered by its billions of people. By then, she might even gain a formidable reputation throughout the great thousand worlds. She had advantages beyond the reach of ordinary people. Her talents were no weaker than anyone else's, and behind her stood the entire Luo god clan. Sometimes, even Mu Chen could feel the gap between them. Although he had a powerful mother, it did not bring him many tangible benefits. In fact, it often brought threats. However, Mu Chen never complained about it. He had come this far relying solely on his own efforts. He understood early on that relying on such blessings would never make him a true powerhouse. Luo Li, who had originally prepared herself to close her eyes and accept Mu Chen's teasing, didn't notice any signs of him acting mischievously. She lifted her gaze slightly, her beautiful eyes fixated on his handsome face. His eyes were somewhat distracted, subtly shifting, but in the end, the boy gave a small, confident smile, bright and full of sunlight. That smile made Luo Li bite her pink lips, and for the first time, there was a rare sign of her acting a bit infatuated. The thing she liked most was the sunny confidence that emanated from Mu Chen. "Luo Li, you should be leaving soon, right?" Mu Chen gently traced her fair, jade-like cheek with his finger and spoke softly. The girl under him trembled slightly, her glassy eyes dimming almost instantly. She had never mentioned this matter, yet Mu Chen had noticed it so sensitively. She gazed at his face, softly saying, "Grandfather only gave me 2 years when I came out, and now, that time has already passed." Her eyes dimmed completely. She knew that once they separated, she didn't know when they would meet again. Although she wished she could always be with Mu Chen, she couldn't do that. She was not alone. She was the future queen of the Luo god clan, with countless people who had protected her clan for years. Mu Chen, I'm sorry. Luo Li bit her lip, her eyes turning red. She knew that Mu Chen would likely chase after her, following her steps in the future. But that path would be filled with thorns and hardships. She knew that for an ordinary boy like him, to stand out in the vast and endless great thousand worlds, it would require an excruciating amount of effort. There were too many geniuses in this world, and the great thousand worlds were far too vast. Many so-called geniuses never even made a ripple, vanishing without a trace. The ones who managed to stand out in this world were all forged through countless trials, and many lost themselves in the process. So, if possible, she would rather Mu Chen remain ordinary. At least this way, his face would always carry that sunny smile, and he wouldn't be scarred by the pursuit of her steps. At this moment, she should have stayed by his side, but Mu Chen gazed at Luo Li's red eyes and smiled gently, saying, "Although I really want to keep you by my side, that would be too selfish. I know you're worried about me, but if you can temporarily leave the Luo god clan and come by my side for me, what reason do I have not to work hard for you? Luo Li, I like you. Although the Luo god clan may seem distant to me now, and I can't make your grandfather or the clan members recognize me, even though they might doubt your judgment, thinking you've just fallen for an ordinary lucky boy." Mu Chen gazed deeply into Luo Li's eyes, which were now filled with emotion. He spoke softly, "Believe me, one day, I will reach the Luo god clan, and then I will show everyone that what you found isn't an ordinary stone from the desert, but a diamond that outshines all others. And for that day, I will give everything I have." Luo Li gently covered her mouth with her hand, her beautiful eyes shimmering with unshed tears. But deep in her gaze was nothing but gratitude and joy. She nodded with determination. "All right, don't just pity me. You won't have it easy at the Luo god clan either. But no matter what happens, you must remember, you have to wait for me." Mu Chen gently wiped the tears from her porcelain-like cheek and smiled. "I will go to the Luo god clan to find you." Mu Chen gently pulled away Luo Li's small hand, then slightly lowered his head and softly kissed her rosy lips. There was a cool touch of jade. A light breeze blew, and the girl, moved by the moment, extended her delicate jade-like arm, wrapping it around the boy's neck, offering up the bright, almost dripping shade of red, as a blush appeared on her flawless face, making it the most beautiful sight atop the mountain. Over the next few days, Mu Chen and Luo Li were almost inseparable. They had clearly become the most eye-catching couple in the entire Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, with countless people admiring them, their eyes full of envy. However, they didn't notice that, as time passed, Luo Li's once cheerful smile gradually faded, turning noticeably more melancholic. Though she wanted to appear happy, she couldn't maintain that calmness. This feeling of sadness persisted until the 8th day. On the training platform at the Luo God Association headquarters, Luo Li and Mu Chen sat back to back on a towering giant rock, leisurely watching the other members of the Luo God Association practicing below them. As they observed the two of them in such a close and affectionate manner, the onlookers couldn't help but feel deeply envious. Luo Li gently held Mu Chen's hand, a faint smile on her cheek. They stayed that way until the sunset, when the red glow of the dying light bathed the earth. Luo Li's jade-like hand suddenly trembled slightly. Mu Chen sensed it. Luo Li turned her head and, for the first time in front of everyone, kissed Mu Chen's cheek lightly, then stood up, raising her delicate face, gazing at the distant sky. The space there suddenly began to twist violently, eventually forming into a massive spatial vortex. Within the vortex, everyone saw what appeared to be a great light streaking through the space, and a towering figure, so grand it seemed to blot out the sun, slowly appeared in the high sky. At that moment, the entire Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy was enveloped by the divine-like figure. Looking at Luo Li's expression, Mu Chen already knew that this figure must be the ruler of the Luo God clan, her grandfather, a super being whose strength had reached Earth Supreme.